Thank you. So the format of tonight is meant to be a conversation between Marg Siberry and John Battle and Xavier about the Little Brothers of Jesus and Charles de Foucauld and his spirituality. We would like to invite you to pose your own questions about that you might have for Xavier. To do that, you can either use the chat facility within Zoom, or if you're not a really confident Zoom user, there is a facility to raise your hand. It's under reactions, if you have a reactions thing. So you can raise your hand, and that at least will highlight it to me that that you're doing that. But the chat is the most secure way of doing it, because I can see the chat very easily, whereas because there's quite a lot of people on this call, it goes over more than one screen, so it might just take a while before you get noticed. But you're very welcome to add in additional questions as we go through the conversation. Right, so we're going to top and tail the conversation with a prayer, but before that, I'll just hand over to John Battle, the chair of the commission, to say a few words of introduction and welcome.
Okay, and thanks, John. Thanks for your patience, everyone. We've now connected with Xavier in Belgium, and Xavier, thank you so much for doing this tonight, this conversation. It was on the 15th of May that we had the wonderful news that St Charles de Foucauld was made a saint of the church. And tonight we want to learn a little bit more about St Charles de Foucauld, but we also want to know a little bit about the life and the work of the fraternities of the Little Brothers and the Little Sisters. And of course, we had the great privilege of having a community here in Leeds for some years, a member of which Xavier was with Brother Guy for so many years. And Xavier is still known in Headingley and Burley and in New Wortley as a major community builder within the neighbourhood. And so perhaps we can explore some of the work of the Little Brothers and Little Sisters tonight, and look at also how the work of the fraternities connect with our charism, if you like, as a Justice and Peace Commission, perhaps in the light of that watchword of Thomas Merton some years ago, when he was suggesting that we need to be contemplatives in a world of action, and examine a little bit how we bring together prayer, contemplative prayer, and also action in our own communities. So how we will conduct this is, I'm going to ask Xavier if he would read Charles de Foucault's prayer of abandonment to start our meeting, and then I'll ask a question to start the conversation going, and then Margaret will ask a question, and we'll do 3 or 4 questions, and then open the conversation up to others. So it'll be a free-flowing, informal way of just perhaps having that conversation to get a little bit closer to the heart of the work of the fraternities and the inspiration of Charles de Foucauld, with particular reference to our justice and peace work. So Xavier, welcome. Would you like to start us with the prayer of abandonment, please?
Thank you. I'm delighted to see so many faces that I've known in Leeds. Remember that this prayer of abandonment was designed, written by Charles de Foucauld in Syria earlier on in his life. It was meant to be a help in individual prayer in the relation to the Father. This is what the words that Charles put into Jesus' words. Father, I abandon myself into your hands. Do with me what you will. Whatever you may do, I thank you. I am ready for all. I accept all. Let only your will be done in me and in all your creatures. I wish no more than this, O Lord. Into your hands I commend my soul. I offer it to you with all the love of my heart, for I love you, Lord, and so need to give myself, to surrender myself into your hands without reserve and with boundless confidence, for you are my Father.
Amen.
Amen.
If I could start that, I think this is the largest conversation we've had with people on the Zoom, and some will perhaps not know the life of St Charles de Foucauld. I know that there are books and there are films that we'll refer to at the end so people can go away themselves and look up his life. But Xavier, would you like to give us a flavour of the life of St Charles de Foucauld? Tell us a bit about him. What did he do? Where did he come from?
So he was born in Strasbourg. I think it was 1858. And had a lovely family. He had a younger sister. But both his parents died when he was fairly young. And even his granddad, who was looking after him, died later on. So he had an experience of losing his family, and that was a difficult, he mentioned it in his life. He had education, he went to the military school, and at that time he had lost faith, like a lot of young people. And he joined the army in Algeria, that is now Algeria, it was North Africa, part of France at the time. And he was good at leading men in battle. It was a time of decolonization. But eventually, he was not happy to be in a garrison, not doing anything. So he gave up the army and went to discover trekking through Morocco, which was forbidden to Europeans. So he disguised as a Jewish rabbi and went through Morocco. That was his experience of being looked down as a Jew, because he was allowed, but he was not. That was an experience of abjection. And the other side of the discovery was to discover men at prayer, which he had given up going to in France. And after these 2 years in Morocco, he wrote his report of this visit, which was acclaimed as a geographical society. And he started looking for what to do next. But the experience of living in Algeria and Morocco and the witness of his family put questions to him. And in middle of 1880s, he met Father Huvelin, and instead of opening to have a question and answer with the priest told him, kneel down and pray and confess. And that was his discovery of the love of God. And that was a big, major change in his life. And after that, the priest sent him to discover the real life in Israel, Palestine at the time. And he did visit Jerusalem and Nazareth and looked for what to do next. And having discovered the love of God, he found that the best was to find a way of life that was closest to the way that Jesus lived. And he applied to join the Trappists in France. And that was a difficult break from his family, from his sister, from his cousin, from his aunt, and he still made a step to go to Notre-Dame-des-Neiges, and then from then on to Syria, because he wanted to live in a poor country, in a poor society, something like he had experienced in Algeria and in Morocco. And that was not enough, because he realized that being mostly European people in Syria, they were protected by the army, whereas the local people would be victims of conflicts by the army or that was late 1880s. So he said his place was not in the Trappist monastery any longer, and he wanted to live alone, like Jesus, being just an ordinary man. But what he slowly discovered was to realize that Jesus, as you know, only started his public life when he was 30. So that's the main approach to his life, to his discovery, that if Jesus took so long to spend in life as an ordinary man of Nazareth, there is something to follow there. And he lived in Nazareth for a few years. That was the time he had plenty to read the gospel, read the Bible, and pray, and help with the poor clares. And then the big change was that he discovered, again, still talking to this spiritual director in France, that he could be of use if he was going to the people in North Africa who don't know Jesus. And he accepted to be ordained as a priest. And in 1901, he went to Beniabes to start what he was hoping to be a community, to live among ordinary people near the desert in North Africa. And that was not the end of it, because he realized that he was close to the French army, which was not a big point for him, but it was an occasion to talk and to pray, and because they would be welcome to his celebration of Mass. But he realized that Algeria, being a huge country, much bigger than France, there were other people who would be further away, who have not heard the gospel. So with La Perrine, he went on expeditions, and he moved to Tamanrasset in 1905. And the big jump, it's amazing how you discover the reasoning in his following this search, that being away from the Europeans, he was not allowed to celebrate Mass or to keep the Eucharist, because it was not allowed at the time if he was a single Christian. But he realized that his motivation was to be for the people. I think that's something that we miss, if I may remark from what the English translation is, that Charles de Foucauld went to the desert. But it's not for the sake of the desert. He went there to Tamanrasset for the sake of the people. And that was his motivation, his priority. And then it took time to listen to them and to live with them and talk. And there is a remark that I've seen in some of the commentary that come up later on in his life. He was trying to adapt to the language and the culture of the Tuaregs. And there is a commentary from a brother who lives in that part of Algeria. He says, the anecdote which speaks to me the most about Brother Charles, and which best summarizes his whole quest, is to see this toothless, serene, and smiling old man sitting on the floor, teaching the Tuaregs the art of knitting. Knitting and crochet work marvelously. Everyone is doing it. The women in pairs, quite a few young people crochet to make waistcoats. But we no longer have any crochet hoops, neither wool nor cotton. If you could send me some, that was the letter to his cousin. Just to show that Charles de Foucauld was motivated to bring Jesus to the people, but he discovered that what they wanted was knitting needles. That was his concrete life. And there is a big moment in life in 1908 when he'd been used to bringing, or motivated by bringing things to the people. He realized that being sick, he really received from them. And that is one of the big discoveries in his life, that he learned to be saved by these neighbors. I think that's the main aspects of his life that I would summarize.
Good.
Xavier,
I think it's good. Margaret, would you want to go to the next question?
Well, I was just going to say, what a wonderful overview, Xavier, and it's wonderful to see you, but we can only see a bit of you. I don't know if it's possible. That's better where you are now, just to move the camera a bit. It'd be lovely to, that's it. Is that better for everyone? Maybe down a bit? Anyway, that's better. Is that better for everyone? Yes?
I know it's...
That's good for us. We can see you now.
See me. Mm.
But you know, you picked up on so many things there, living the life of an ordinary person and finding what ordinary people needed and recognizing that he, in fact, was being saved by them. So
yes.
Just wondering, when you were a young man, what was it that attracted you to want to join the Little Brothers, or to be part of this ongoing search and this long search and this story and this witness?
I was motivated as a teenager to try and learn more about Jesus, that's for sure. But what I discovered was that the Little Brothers lived like ordinary people. They lived and worked like ordinary people, and no special clothes, but they live in community. And that's something that I was looking for. So I was ready to, and it was an international community, and at the time of opening in the world, it was to know about these people living ordinary lives and to be able to share and have a simple life, which lay people do, I mean, by any means, but it was living together as brothers to live this idea. That's the way I would put it.
So the first motivation was to find out more about Jesus and to do that in community.
Quite.
This inspiration of living among ordinary people as an ordinary person yourself and without anything special. I think that's probably what most of us think of and remember from all of the time you spent in Leeds. So John, did you want to pick up on the whole business of the...
I can remember when I came round to the Beamsleys and used to visit you there, and it's a question that intrigues me. Because yes, to live together in community, but if we try to live together even in family communities, it's not always that easy to bring together work, community and contemplation. And what I remember about the house in the Beamsleys was, I think it was up in the attic, you had a little bit of a space up there where you had an altar and a space for prayer, contemplative prayer. And could you say a little bit of how contemplation and your work life fitted together, and particularly the role of the Eucharist, I think, was very strong, wasn't it, in both the life of St Charles and yourselves? Would you say a little bit about that to explain it a bit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, it shows very well clearly in the life of Charles de Foucauld himself, when he was living among people and reading the gospel, because that's a way to discover, to take in what Jesus was living and to imitate in doing what Jesus would do in circumstances of life. And so you reinforce that by living in community, by being able to share, to have a common approach. We don't have to agree on a lot of issues, small things, but about the motivation in life, the outlook on the world. That's something that we share in community. And this is shared in prayer, in individual prayer from the brothers, but also by sharing the gospel between the brothers on occasions. That's why when I found myself to be alone in 2013, I said I'd rather not stay on my own, even though there was a lot of good reason for being in Leeds. But I was not like Charles de Foucauld, be prepared to live among people on my own. I applied to go back if there was nobody wanting to learn English in UK, to go back to the continent. So that's what my appreciation of community life in.
Thank you, Margaret.
Well, Xavier, you've kind of touched on something there that I suppose we'd all have tasted a bit of whilst you were in Leeds, but you know, many years your community life was with Brother Guy in Leeds, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So can you maybe talk about that experience a little bit, and about the communities in Leeds that both of you were involved with?
Mm-hmm. I lived in Leeds 37 years altogether.
Yes.
And most of it was with Guy. Mm. There was a time when we had younger people looking for their way of life to share and to learn and to pray with us, and friends around. And one big evolution in life, you might remember that, I think it was 1977, when we started welcoming Chilean refugees. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of people involved with that. There was boat people before that, but Guy was on his own and he gave accommodation to Chilean refugees. And that opened up to a lot of political, human, social aspect of life, which you don't always discover from an ordinary work. And at the same time, it was a beginning of Justice and Peace in Leeds. And Guy knew you and Anne and a lot of people involved in Justice and Peace. And it was a parallel development in a fraternity. And the fact we used to share different work experiences. And I personally, after the 1980s, I was made redundant 3 times. Wow. So that's a break in life, but an occasion to see that a lot of people are unemployed. I was not the only one, and I could rely on somebody else to feed me if necessary, and I was not homeless. And So I had different experiences of work, and I was not, I mean, everybody have their own approach, and Guy was involved in as a shop steward, and he did it quite well. But that's something you learn. And then personally, I was more involved with residents associations in Leeds 6 or Leeds 12. And that was a positive way to be among residents, to look for a better way of neighborhood. And I'm very happy, and I've grown and received a lot from that, from those situations, yes.
Yes. I think we all felt your presence in various ways, both you and Guy. And what you said about Guy and work, I think he did invaluable work for the commission, you know, the booklet he produced, all his reflection on the whole world of work. And you complemented each other very much in your involvement in local community work. John, you were going to talk a little bit more about the involvement with Justice and Peace, weren't you?
I think Brother Guy wrote that book on work when unemployment was at its highest, the dignity of work, and I suspect that booklet and that working party that Guy led with others that are on the Zoom has yet to come into its own. The world of work, it's still a big question that's there as a seminal work, but I think you're still well remembered. I have to say, even to this day in Leeds 12 in the community centre in New Wortley, your name still echoes around the rooms from time to time from people that remember you there. And I just wondered, can you remember any, can you share any experience with us when you had what were the highlights of the work with the community? Because sometimes it's very, very hard building community. And given the experience of the lockdown and COVID, it's almost as if we've had to start again to call people out of their homes and start to remake the connections. But what were your experiences, your good experiences of community? What do you remember?
One experience, one bit of time I spent going around in Leeds 6 with a newsletter. There was a paper called Headline, which was produced by the residents, and we would be going around homes looking for anybody who was interested. And that was a way to, I remember being called a community man at the time by the residents, because I was being around every other month with the Headline. And that's something that at the time, you remember John Judy Thomas, who was a councillor at the time in Leeds 6. And she said, well, with your background, you do well to be working for the community. But I was not sure about that, because I wanted to remain on the shop floor. But eventually that's a bit what happened when 15 years later, I was a handy person and had the opportunity to work in people's homes, doing small repairs or gardens, and being able to work in immigrants, Pakistani homes, where you would normally have difficult, you would not be allowed in if you are not known. And that was an amazing way of meeting people and having time to listen and to share and to help. So I remember these.
And did they ever ask you about your life as a member of the fraternity? Did they ever ask you about, if you like, your religious life, or did they just see you as a great community person?
I suppose, yes, the summary to be a great community person, because there was no occasion to ask, what do you do on Sundays? Or I remember in the 70s, there was still time when on the Royal Park pub, there was the the sing-song in the Saturday night. That was a social event, but that got a bit down by the music later on. But no, we got to share with the Irish brothers who came to live with us, and they had more difficulty because there was with the troubles in Northern Ireland, it was not obvious for Irish people to be welcome in UK. But for Frenchmen, it was not an issue. I remember being very rarely tackled at work for being French, and remember Napoleon or the times of war that we had. So I was lucky that all the years I was working in Leeds, it was part of the European Union or the common market. So there was no tension there. Mm-hmm. So it was a way of being there. I remember when at some stage I was working making boxes on the Cardigan Road for a factory, and there was some time in the evening because the place was very close to home, and I was involved with sharing care, taking an evening out with people who wouldn't be allowed to have a social life, and that was a positive development socially just to be there and help and answer but no, I don't think there was a question of. I suppose yes, I remember this when I was younger. The brother said, you know, the word religious doesn't mean much in English. So if you say you are religious, they will not understand. And I said, oh, I'm a bit like a monk. Are you a monk? Why do you smoke? And the issue on the shop floor was sort of, at least don't let them take your money. That was the way of the shop floor. But otherwise, it was part of making one's living by work, and that was an option that is possible. What's possible in UK, and not so easy in India or Africa or other countries. So I was fortunate there, and that was I had asked to be sent to Europe, to stay in Europe, not to go to other continents. And I was very happy to be in Leeds.
But you remember Brian Jackson in the community who died recently, and there was people getting together to organise Brian's funeral, and they remembered you as the monk activist. Margaret, you had, perhaps if you took one more question, Margaret, about the international developments, and then perhaps others might like to ask questions.
Xavier, I just wondered, could you give us a kind of sense of the reach of the brothers around the world? You know, what kind of situations are others working in?
In a way, it's easier in Brussels because we are the headquarters for the world.
Yes.
But we are so scattered and few between. The moment we are 131. And I think it's about 28 countries. So we could see, we had this year, we had a general chapter which had been put back because of the COVID. And the chapter had more than 20 delegates from 4 continents. And it was a feat, an achievement to have this delegate being able to travel That was for so many months and years, it was not possible. And to understand, to have time to, of course, there was a language issue. Some couldn't speak French, some couldn't speak, even English was not their first language. But we could communicate and work in meetings and work and listen and share in lunch and evenings. And that was an experience which is part of the fraternity. Of course, that's one of the themes that comes from the chapter is diversity. Because of the cultural setup that brothers live in the world, they have to adapt. They are not Europeans, so they'll be African or South American, and we have to listen and understand. And even the reception of the gospel, which take root in different countries, and we have to adapt. And so that's something that we learn by sharing, and which I've been privileged to live more in the last 6 years when I was in Brussels and visiting around the world. So that's one of the experiences.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. We have people on the Zoom, I think, who have experience of the fraternities as well. There are brothers on as well. And if anyone would like to share their comments, if you could indicate with putting a hand up or going into chat, and Joel can connect you through. Is anybody would like to ask Xavier a question?
We've got a couple of chats already. So Brother Francis says, remembers volunteering with Sharing Care when I was with you and Guy. And it was a great time of his life. Do you want to add something to that by unmuting yourself?
Yeah, I spent about 12 months or so living with Xavier and Guy. It was a very I worked in a care home there, and I loved the time I spent there. And St Charles de Foucauld has made a big impact on my life ever since. I've since joined an Anglican Benedictine order, but I remember with fondness the time I spent with Xavier and Guy. I've still got icons that I bought from them when Guy worked for the Path, volunteering with the Path workshop. They're still hung on my wall.
Thank you, Francis.
How are you doing? You all right?
Well, I'm getting older, like you and me, and most people, yes. So I'm happy to share when I can. But of course, there was a part of the communication we did. The service that we take in Brussels is to receive and communicate the information that comes from the world. So I'm a bit housebound, not by illness, but by the work to be done.
Yeah.
Now, there's also a comment in the chat from Anne Forbes. Anne, do you want to just talk to that for a moment?
Yes, good to see you and hear from you, Xavier. That's lovely. It's just my memories when you're talking about the community is particularly of social gatherings we had both at your house and other houses with recent asylum seekers who had come to Leeds, especially those who were French speaking, and how welcoming the pair of you always were. And then I just remember you saying in passing once that your washing machine, when you had moved to the house in Clive Chase, your washing machine was almost like a communal washing machine because all sorts of people, hospitality extended to use some of the facilities as well. And that was sort of all part of your way of life, I think. But I don't ask you another question altogether about Charles de Foucauld, if you don't mind. And that is, I am reading this rather wonderful book that you gave me years ago, called some 5 years ago, I think, called Journey to Tamanrasset. And I read about 2 or 3 chapters a day in the last weeks. But I haven't come yet to the end of Charles de Foucauld and his death. And I wanted to ask, because he was actually killed, wasn't he? He was actually murdered.
Quite, yes, he was.
And did he know? I mean, that's right. What I think I wanted to ask you is, was there always a risk that that would happen? Did he know when he was journeying further and further south? Was this an increased risk, or was it really just almost like a coincidence that it happened? Was he prepared for martyrdom, basically?
Well, he had asked for martyrdom as a way of praying God to be like Jesus for a lot of his life.
Yes.
But obviously, living in Tamanrasset, he was 50 miles away from the garrison. There was French troops, and he knew that he had made a choice of living next to the people and not in the army like he was in Beniabes. And the fact was, in 1916, the movement in North Africa were quite moving in that direction, that terrorists would move, and they eventually, he had built a fortress in Tamanrasset, which you can still see now, but it was for the sake of sheltering the people from the village. It was not for himself, it was for the people of the village. And the authorities that came to get hold of him wanted to take the Frenchman because he was too influential among the local people. So he knew that there was development around, but he knew that he was there for the sake of the neighbors, and that was his priority. So
and who actually shot him? Who actually killed him?
They were, not sure the exact name, from Tunisia. No, yes, that part of Libya, that came looking to making use of the way that the French troops were more busy in Europe. And so in 1916, that's when he was killed. Okay,
thank you.
But one of the amazing things about the end of his life, with not making any conversion, to live among people and giving them knitting needles, is that the miracle that caused the canonization was a very unusual miracle, because it was not somebody who would ask to be cured with help from Charles de Foucauld. It was a parish in Saumur who had a novena at the end of November to ask for a miracle. And the man who was cured, he was not actually ill. He just fell from a roof 15 meters, and he was not killed. And he went back to work within a month. And that's something that Charles de Foucauld in Tamanrasset didn't make any conversion. He spent most of his time with the people to learn their language and their culture. And the same way, this man who was cured, he's not even a Christian. And so that's some of the evolution of the sign that we discovered through the end of his life.
Okay. Can I just ask Moira Potier to unmute herself and just introduce yourself? You put a comment in the chat, but might be good for you to introduce yourself to everybody.
Yes, hello everybody. I know some people on this chat, on this Zoom. I'm from Leeds originally, Headingley in Leeds, but I'm living in Liverpool now for most of my life, so I consider myself to be a Scouser. I put in the chat, just for information for those who don't know that, and Xavier knows this well, that the Little Brothers were in Leeds from 1952. I don't know if everybody knows that. And the first Little Brothers who came to Leeds were welcomed by Bishop Heenan. I don't know why Leeds. I still don't know, and I don't know if Xavier knows that, but they came to Leeds, and for 4 summers when I was 3, I'm 73 now, I was 3, the Little Brothers lived in our attic. So we got to meet lots of Little Brothers who were coming to suss out, if you like, where their fraternity would be. And in 1956, Brother Roger, who was the first brother, set up the first fraternity in Leeds in Hyde Park Road. Is that right, Xavier? Yeah.
That's correct. That's correct, yes.
Roger was a remarkable man. He'd been in Dachau and so suffered a lot. And for us as children, just so many memories, but one was that he had such poor digestion. He'd have to have all bran for his breakfast, and we'd never seen all bran. It was a complete shock to us, really. He was an amazing man. And so from my perspective, I've been involved with the Little Brothers and the fraternity since then, and I am now, just for again, it's a plug this, but I'm the European responsible for the lay fraternities. We haven't mentioned them, but there are lay fraternities, and there were many of us in Rome last weekend. So if anybody wants to know anything about lay fraternity, please get in touch, because we're trying to promote the fraternity.
Moira, if you'd there used to be a connection, I think it was 2 people in Skipton, wasn't it, who had the lay fraternities in our neighbourhood. But if you could put a contact point or a reference of how we can get in touch with the lay fraternities, just type it into the chat, then we'll make that part of the report.
Is that okay? I'll put my email in, shall I?
Well, I should have your email already, Moira, so if it's okay, I will be doing a follow-up email tomorrow, and I'll put it on that, yeah?
Thank you very much.
I did give Joe the link for the website of the JesusCaritas.info, where they can find the information about all the groups in the world, the groups that are in England and those outside there.
Excellent, good. Are there any more? Sheila, I think Sheila had a piece in chat.
Well, you have to unmute yourself first, though.
It was Tony, actually.
Yeah, I was just saying that when we were first married, we met Frank and Hannah Gilmartin and other people who were in the lay fraternity, and they in turn introduced us to Brother Guy and Xavier. So we met people of the lay fraternity in those days, and then this dates it. I was a manager in a factory, in a hosiery factory, and the MD remembered a cleaner, I can't remember her name now, who was a cleaner, and the praise, she was one of the little sisters, that the compliments that were paid to this little sister, how thorough she was and how personable, how she related to people.
Yeah, and I remember I used to go with my sister to the Little Sisters when they were in the West Blocks. I remember Sister Iris Mary, Michelle Elaine. I think my sister went more often than I did, but I have a fond memory of going to the chapel in their house. It's very simple, but beautiful, prayerful.
Thank you. There's a question from Michael ODonnell. Do you want to just put that to everybody?
Hi, I'm Michael from Glasgow. Now, can you tell me, many years ago, I seen a feature on television, and it seemed to focus
That's right.
on the Little Brothers.
It did.
An issue regarding, did one of them work for cleansing department? Can you hear me?
In Leeds.
Yes. He worked, I think, so now this is going back a good number of years ago. I was young at the time.
I don't remember if somebody working in the cleaning department.
Cleansing.
You have brothers
like a bin man.
Bin man, no. I don't remember.
No.
The first brothers.
Is there a brother Ian? Was there a brother Ian in London, I think?
There was
in
a brother
London.
Ian in London.
Yeah. Ian, he worked as a gardener. And then he was cleaning in the biggest university in London. Yes, you're right.
Right. And lastly, the little sisters had a house in a council estate in Garthamlock, Glasgow. And their witness was a great witness.
I'm sure.
Then sadly, they were pulled out many years ago.
Yeah.
Well, they left Leeds to go to Glasgow. Yeah, that was part of the reason for moving to go to Scotland.
Yeah, then they moved back down to Walsingham or something like that.
To Birmingham.
Back down to England.
Birmingham, and then now they closed Birmingham as well, yes. But Kathy would comment on that from Belfast if she's online.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. God bless.
God bless.
Xavier, looking forward, we're coming towards the close now, but looking forward, where do you see the vocation and the future of the Little Brothers and the future of the church? What are your general impressions, just briefly?
But I remember that we did ask that question years ago. Guy asked that question, and the priest who was helping our meeting said, well, the future is certainly the lay people. And as far as the fraternity is concerned, we have 2 novices in Colombia at the moment. One is from Cuba and one is from Venezuela. And they are on retreat at the moment, and they will make their commitment in early June. And we have a novice in Cameroon and a novice in Poland. So not many. We have more brothers who pass away than to join, but we're still 131 and able to communicate. But we have a few in care homes. I mean, that's part of life. The care home situation is something that we come to, not all of us, but some of us will go through, and that's you discover when you get old and you have become dependent. Something you discover that's an illness that you have not chosen. You have chosen to be part of ordinary people's lives, and sometimes it catches up with you, and you make the most of it. And some of the brothers testify amazingly about their experience in care homes.
And what about the church under Pope Francis? I mean, wonderfully, he has made Brother Charles a saint, which I think is a great signal to the direction of the church. But what's your feelings about the church, just in general? Where are we going?
I've said to some people that I think it was something like the work of Guy Jarosson, who passed away in 2013, and he was involved in Benedict retiring and Pope Francis being elected in that same year. And I think that some of and we are blessed with not just us, but a lot of ordinary people, and to movement in the church to have a synodality and to declericalize. That's a big move. I mean, we have not had a resident brother priest in Leeds. We had one in London because there was a need for the novitiate at the time. But some most continents, it's useful to, when the parish is far away, to have one brother who is a priest. But that's something that we leave without making any special care for them. So Pope Francis is certainly a bonus for us in the declericalization of the church and to open the dialogue. And we have met, obviously, a lot of good priests in Leeds and around, and there's no way we are not judging, and there's different ways of serving the world and serving the church, and there's not one way better than another.
Okay, is there anyone else would like to say anything? Otherwise, we might draw to a close with a prayer. I just want to add that my reflection listening to this conversation is the years ago when you and Brother Guy were in Beamsley Terrace, and Justice and Peace was getting going in the 70s, and the focus of that was, there was high unemployment that you mentioned, and the world of work was a big issue. The conflicts in Northern Ireland was a big issue. Asylum seekers are a big issue, the Chileans and others. And I think in some ways, those issues are still with us today and haven't left us. So for justice and peace, the work of poverty, and not everybody has full employment, lots of people have part-time employment, and poverty is for those who are in work now as well, if not more so. And we've got the issues of asylum seekers, larger than ever in our society, the challenge there, as well as the questions of sustainability and the environment. So some of the challenges that you are helping us to address then are still remaining with us. So thank you for your comments this evening. And just to say that the washing, sometimes people say meals bring people together in communities, but so do washing machines. And the washing machine that you kept going in the Clydes has now moved into the community centre in New Wortley, and it's the centre with a cafe in New Wortley and a new built community centre there. And New Wortley is starting to really build back now, not least to the seeds that you sowed in the past.
Wonderful.
Could we perhaps move to the prayer if there's nothing else that anyone wants to add? Margaret, would you like a final word?
I would just like to reflect on the number of people who have contributed this evening, and from all, different variety of contexts in their connection with the Little Brothers. And I think just for you to know, Xavier, that this has been the greatest number of people we've had on Zoom. So in your very ordinary, quiet, amongst us lives, you have obviously touched so many people here this evening. And maybe that's something to take back to the brothers, that, so many people wanted to be in touch this evening. I think that's a real tribute to yourself and to Guy and to the brothers who came before who I didn't know. So thank you.
And Joe Burns, who helps us so much with the technology, is brilliant at actually following up and making sure that people keep in touch and that we get appropriate information to follow up the conversations. So contacts, information, where to get the film, where to get the books, how to perhaps link to the lay fraternities. We'll make all that available and share that through Justice and Peace as well, because there are some real connective threads, I think, between the fraternities, St Charles de Foucauld, and the work of Justice and Peace that's yet to fuller fruition. Work to do on it, and Joe as a gift for making sure that we follow things through. So everyone on the Zoom tonight will get a contact, and we'll be able to build on it from there and develop it. But from tonight, Xavier, just to say thank you most sincerely for offering to share this conversation with us and making yourself available. You were saying when we spoke on the phone that you were looking forward to retirement soon. I suspect, and I'm sure others who have retired on this Zoom will concur, that I can't see you not having anything other than an active contemplative retirement. I can't see you disappearing. I hope that we're in touch again before too long, but do enjoy the break when you actually return for a little while. And thank you.
You might remember, John, we're going to meet Paddy O'Leary again in June. He's retired now in near Switzerland, and he will come to, he's now making time to come to join the Brothers meeting when we meet in Germany.
Excellent. Good. Joe, would you like to put the prayer on the screen, and we'll close with the final prayer and thank you to everyone for joining in.
Yes, I'll put that up on the screen right now. This was Xavier's suggestion and John's suggestion, I think, that prayer from Fratelli Tutti.
I suppose the intention is to that everybody pray together. And what the reason for me to favor that prayer is that the encyclical letter Fratelli Tutti is something that Charles de Foucauld would be dancing for joy with that because of the atmosphere and the way that he related to the non-Christian people in Algeria was why I think he would welcome and pray with us when we read it together. So we can
and
pray.
Wonderfully, I think Charles de Foucauld is mentioned in the final section of Fratelli Tutti by Pope Francis as someone to look to, and obviously he's carried that forward by in the saint recently to look to as an inspiration. I'll just read this final prayer. Lord, Father of our
human. Shall we read it together?
No, it doesn't work on Zoom.
Equally in dignity, pour forth into our hearts a fraternal spirit and inspire in us a dream of renewed encounter, of dialogue, justice, and peace. Move us to create healthier societies and a more dignified world, a world without hunger, poverty, violence, and war. May our hearts be open to all the peoples and nations of the earth. May we recognize the goodness and beauty that you have sown in each of us, and thus forge bonds of unity, common projects, and shared dreams. Amen.
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 Thank you.
Xavier, once again, a most sincere thank you for all of us, and let's keep in touch. Thank you, everyone.
So, all very welcome to say goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
And there's quite a few thank yous in the chat. I'll make sure that I pass them on to Xavier.
Okay, thank you, Joe.